I've gone on record to say that anyone who wants to classify themselves as a true gamer should be able to boast about beating at least one really hard game. And I'm not talking about just going through the hard mode on one of your favorite titles. No, I'm talking about one of those special hard games. The ones that live on in history for the hearts, the wills, and the controllers they broke it. It takes a certain courage and madness to step to one of these titles, but the pride in knowing that you took their best shot and made it out to the other side is something you'll be able to take with you forever. So with that said, it's time to go over the biggest notches on my own gaming belt. These are the top 10 hardest games I've ever beaten. Now before we get started with number 10, I need to reiterate. This is a list of the hardest games that I've ever beaten, not a list of the hardest games ever made. As a matter of fact, the first game we're going to talk about shouldn't pose a challenge to anybody of the age of 7. The thing is though, I was 7 once, and my history with this game is not pretty. Humongous Entertainment's Backyard Sports franchise is the single most nostalgic group of games of my earliest days as a gamer. I was never a kid that asked for things I saw on TV all that often, so when I went to my parents and requested Backyard Baseball 2003 for my birthday after seeing the commercial, they knew it was something I wanted really badly. Being able to play as the superstar athletes of the day in kid form was the coolest thing I could imagine, and as such, I tried to get my hands on as many different versions of each game as possible. Backyard Baseball 2005 would go down as my absolute favorite, but I got a ton of playtime out of the earlier baseball games, along with football, basketball, soccer, and even the skateboarding game was a ton of fun. The fact that I bought a copy of Backyard Baseball 2009 for the Nintendo Wii in the year of our Lord 2020 as a 23-year-old man should show just how special most of these games were and still are to me. Notice how I said most of them. While I absolutely love Canada's pastime nowadays, hockey was a sport I had no interest in as a kid, mainly because I couldn't skate. Actually, I still can't skate, but that's not the point. When a relative gifted me backyard hockey one year for Christmas, I was wholly unprepared for what lay ahead. Not knowing the rules of the sport really didn't help, but what really did me in was the fact that shooting the puck was mapped to the right mouse button, and the mouse I was using at the time had a broken right mouse button. I hadn't even bothered to get it replaced because nothing else I used the computer for at the time, including every other backyard sports game, required its use. And I was 7. I didn't even know that button did anything anyway. Coupled with the fact that I didn't have the manual to look up the controls, and every single game I played would result in a humiliating defeat where I couldn't even muster a single goal. Not even having the GOAT himself, Pablo Sanchez, was enough to get me over the hump. As you could probably guess, I quickly grew frustrated with backyard hockey, and I went back to the sports I was more comfortable with. It wasn't until a few years later where I gave it another attempt with a working mouse and a knowledge of the controls where I was able to get going and eventually win a championship. And even that was tougher than any of the other backyard sports games I played. This is obviously by far the easiest game on this list, but that initial check into the boards back in the early 2000s really did a number on yours truly, and it took me about another decade to appreciate hockey for the amazing sport that it is. Is this game hard? No, of course it's not. Was it hard? You bet your juice box it was. Pokemon is one of the highest grossing franchises in history, and like many games with that much widespread appeal, it accomplishes this by being very easy to pick up and play. There certainly are points in each of the main titles that could give both new players and veterans a hard time depending on the team they've assembled, but nothing in these games came close to matching the challenge presented to me in Pokemon Colosseum. Pokemon Colosseum throws the player for a loop by discarding many of the standard conventions found in the main series titles. There are no wild Pokemon to be found in this game, meaning the only way to level your team up is through trainer battles. And since every battle in this game is a double battle, it opens the door for all sorts of unfamiliar strategies to be thrown your way. But the biggest hurdles to impede your progress are the limited roster and the save system. As I said before, there are no wild encounters in Colosseum, so the only way to get new Pokemon is to snag the shadow ones you find from other trainers, and I don't mean any offense if one of these is your favorite, but most of your choices here are not all that great. It also doesn't help that the process of purifying these shadow Pokemon takes forever. I mean, you could always just use the time flute, but you only get 3 of those, so you're probably going to still have to spend a lot of time purifying anyway. But the biggest obstruction to your progress is the fact that you can only save the game by visiting a PC. In the other games, you can pick the game up, play for 5 minutes, save, and put it down again. Here you have no choice but to invest more time into each play session, and if you fail at catching a shadow Pokemon after not saving for a while, your choice is to either restart and lose whatever progress you made, or press on without that Pokemon, so I hope it's not one you wanted. All this comes together to make a slow and frankly exhausting experience. This is definitely the worst overall game on this list. I normally make it a point to not use legendaries on my team in Pokemon, but given my limited options here, I had no qualms about enlisting some of the legendary beasts to finally get through this slog of a game. I haven't played XD Gale of Darkness yet, but from what I hear, that one's even harder. Maybe someday I'll give it a shot, but not today. The Donkey Kong Country series has always had my vote as the gold standard of 2D platformers. The originals had graphics that were unprecedented in the early 90s, and the modern titles have such creatively fun level design that they've left all competition in the dust. When you add on the fact that things like the music, secrets, and bosses have been excellent all the way through, you get a franchise that has earned its place in the annals of history. But there is one thing that none of these games will give you, and that is a free pass. While not impossible, the DKC games have never been pushovers, and every victory here is a well-earned one. Of the 5 Donkey Kong Country games that currently exist, I've played 4 of them and beaten 3 of those 4. And of those 3, the one that gave me the most trouble was Donkey Kong Country Returns. Coming out almost exactly 14 years after DKC 3, Returns set about reminding everyone not only how good these games could be, but also how hard they could be. New mechanics like the ground pound, climbing on grass surfaces, and mid-air roll jumps became essential skills for anyone looking to reclaim the island from the Tikis. And while there are no water levels to be found, the minecart levels make a triumphant return, along with the debut of the infamous rocket barrel stages. I lost more lives on these levels than the rest of the game combined, but I didn't mind that because they were just so exhilarating. That's the thing about Donkey Kong Country Returns and the series as a whole. While difficult, nothing in these games is cheap, and every death will feel like your fault. This encourages players to always give it another go, and any difficult game that can do that is worthy of praise. The last thing to mention is that Returns is the only game in the series that includes a super guide to beat a level for you. And it's not exactly a point of pride to say I ended up using its services a handful of times when I first played the game back in 2010. Later on, I would go back and beat most of those levels legitimately, but it wasn't until I was actually halfway through writing the script for Tropical Freeze to be in this segment that I finally mustered up the courage to go face my arachnophobia and beat that spider chase stage, which was the last one I hadn't done myself. I finished with a grand total of 0 Kong letters and puzzle pieces, but if ignoring those means that I never have to touch that level again, I can live with that. On the subject of Donkey Kong, the biggest reason why I was so happy that Little Mac got announced for Super Smash Bros. 4 was that it meant a reckoning was finally coming the Big Ape's way. I was gonna get my revenge for Punch-Out Wii. Thank goodness that winning against DK is not required to beat the game. Otherwise, Punch-Out Wii, one of my all-time favorite games, wouldn't have been able to claim a spot on this countdown. In fact, by the time that darn dirty ape shows up, you're at the point in the game where you're just trying to win as many matches as possible before losing 3 times and hanging up the gloves. And it's not like everything before that was a breeze either. At its core, Punch-Out has always been about pattern recognition and timing. The higher you climb in the ranks, the harder your opponents get and the harder they hit. And once you finally rip the championship from the clutches of Philly's personal powerful pugilist, you gotta turn around and defend that title against a harder version of every opponent you beat on your way to the top. Even the relative pushovers from the early game have new tricks up their sleeve designed to take what's rightfully yours. But don't let the difficulty dissuade you. There isn't a bad fight in this game, and I would recommend Punch-Out Wii to anyone and everyone looking for a fun challenge dripping with personality. You want a piece of the champ? You better bring your best before I beat the brakes, the brains, and the bogus out of all you bums. And as for you, Donkey Kong, don't worry. Your day will come too. I can promise you that.
Why can't you just be a good boy and die?
You first. You second.
I initially didn't have any interest in taking a crack at Cuphead. I'm not a fan of 30s animation, and the promotional material didn't really offer much else to intrigue me. But when my brother Sam bought the game and asked me to play it co-op with him because of my experience with side-scrollers, I decided to give it a shot. What followed was one of the most frustrating yet rewarding gaming experiences of my life. Our final death toll? 1,869.
It'd be funny if it weren't so pathetic.
The game is split between Contra-styled run-and-gun levels and multi-stage boss battles, and even though I don't particularly enjoy the source material, the amount of effort and passion that went into making this game was so evident that it won me over in mere minutes. The game's soundtrack even hit #1 on the Billboard Jazz charts, an honor so unbelievably deserved I can't even put it into words. What I can put into words is just how hard this game is. There isn't a level or boss in this game that won't mop the floor with you at least once, but the process of learning attack patterns and slowly but steadily improving at each stage or fight before finally emerging on the other side victorious is intoxicating. This is another game where every failure feels like your fault, and nothing in this game is cheap or unfair. The best hard video games have some sort of trick in place to encourage a player to keep going and not quit, and Cuphead has what just might be the best trick ever. Each time you die, you're shown just how far you got through the boss or level, letting you know that you are indeed making progress and improving as you get slowly closer and closer to triumph. And let me tell you, when you start falling just short of completion, it feels personal, and your will to win is reinvigorated tenfold, so when it finally happens, you're on top of the world. Though it does not change the fact that Sam and I had plenty of moments like this.
We were so close!
Did you know that you could buy the Cuphead death sound effect as a text notification from iTunes? You have to be a total psycho to want that, but you could. Mario games are typically easy. Sports games are also typically easy. This means that obviously, Mario sports games, more often than not, are typically easy. But just like everything else in the number 5 game on this list, the difficulty is anything but typical. Welcome to the Thunderdome, boys and girls, because Mario Strikers Charged is tough, and you best be too if you want to survive what it has to offer. Taking the off-the-wall zaniness of a normal Mario sports game and ramping it up higher than it's ever gone before, playing Strikers is nothing short of an absolute thrill. But with that said, anyone brave enough to take on the road to the Striker Cup will be presented with the hardest game starring Nintendo's plumbing patriarch that they'll ever play in their entire life. Unless, of course, they hate themselves enough to take a crack at the lost levels, in which case my advice would be to find a good support group. You don't need to do that to yourself. The pace of this game is so fast and unpredictable, it's almost impossible to keep up. And you'll need to be able to change your plan of attack multiple times in the span of mere moments if you want to conquer basically anything beyond the Fire Cup. If you somehow manage to get all the way to PD in the Striker Cup finals, then the game really rips the gloves off and starts taking you to task. And if you lose, then it's back to the start of the tournament with you. If you want to change your team up to try a different approach, then be prepared to have to start from square one all over again. What lands Mario Strikers Charged above something like Cuphead is that even though it doesn't start out nearly as hard, there's a lot more bounces that need to go your way by endgame. With Cuphead, things are consistent enough to where you can slowly but steadily improve. Strikers will show you no such respect. You could squeak out a win by a goal or two in one match only to lose by 7 in your very next contest. It took just over a year of playing Cuphead on and off again to finish it. Mario Strikers Charged took me over 10 times as long. There's also the challenge mode. Good luck with that.
Pain. That's it.
Anyone familiar with Dark Souls will not be surprised to find it on this list. In fact, the only thing that might surprise them is the fact that it only got to number 4. The thing is, once I got past the halfway point by obtaining the Lord Vessel, there really wasn't anything left in the game excluding the DLC that I found to be apocalyptically arduous. That doesn't mean it was easy though. Far from it. Most people's experience with Dark Souls will go something like this. You'll start the game, make very little progression, get extremely frustrated, and call it quits. You'll try to move on, but the thought of taking another swing at it will creep into your thoughts, and it'll stay there until you finally give in and make another attempt. With the knowledge from your first failure fresh in your mind, you'll start to slowly find yourself making progress, and before you know it, you'll be 50 hours in having the time of your life.
I live, I die, I live again!
There's a reason why out of all the games on this list, Dark Souls got the nod for intro to video games. It has the process of trial and error with constant improvement down to a science, and every time you bring down a boss in Lordran, you feel like you can take on the world.
And I'm taking you down, I'm taking you down, I'm taking you out, I'm taking you out, and I'm taking you out for dinner.
In many ways, Dark Souls and Super Meat Boy are the complete opposite of one another. Dark Souls is an action RPG, Super Meat Boy is a platformer. Dark Souls is drab and dreary, Super Meat Boy is bright and colorful. Dark Souls requires patience, Super Meat Boy requires perseverance. Really, the only common ground these games have is that they're both really freaking hard! If you were to count up my death toll in every other game on this list, including the two we haven't gotten to yet, it would still be fewer failures than Super Meat Boy. No joke, as of the time of this script being written, I have died 12,314 times between the Steam and Switch versions of this game. That sounds like complete torture, but Super Meat Boy is so well designed that you won't even notice how many times you bite it, and when you do, it's turned around into a positive. See, a level in Super Meat Boy lasts no longer than 30 seconds, there's no life system, and you respawn immediately. This means if you come to a level that's giving you trouble, you're constantly incentivized to keep going because it takes no time at all to get to the point at which you die. And when you finally get to Bandage Girl and complete the stage, the game will give you a replay of all of your attempts at once to show you how many times you died along with your successful attempt. In essence, the game acknowledges your perseverance every time you complete one of its stages. This is helped further by a soundtrack so good it will never get old no matter how many times you die while listening to it, and a control scheme so smooth that landing a successful attempt on the later levels makes you feel like you're in the Matrix. Beating Super Meat Boy has always been a source of pride for me, only slightly overshadowed by the fact that, like Donkey Kong from Punch-Out Wii, this game has a boogeyman of mine. That would be the Fifth World's Warp Zone starring the kid from I Wanna Be the Guy. At least they're faithful to the source material. You've probably noticed the lack of really old games on this list. Any gamer who knows their history is cognizant of the fact that games from way back in the day are typically accepted as being harder than the titles of today. Back then, developers couldn't add as much content to their games, so the go-to method of ensuring a customer got their money's worth was to ramp up the difficulty so that every game couldn't be finished in an afternoon. And unlike a lot of modern challenging games, which could be hard while still respecting the player, the oldies have no qualms about not only being difficult, but unfair. And nowhere were there more games like this than the Nintendo Entertainment System. I've tried my hand at quite a few NES hard games in my day thanks to the NES Classic, and to this day the only one I've seen through to the other side was the original Castlevania. There's a reason why Castlevania is still remembered 33 years after its release. It's that freaking difficult. There are three main culprits in regards to making this game the gauntlet that it is. First, we have the control. Not only is it incredibly stiff, giving you only one speed to move and only allowing you to attack what's directly in front of you, but you can't adjust your jump in midair. Once you take off, you're gone, and if you messed up, there's no way to save yourself. The second culprit is the enemies. Whether it's the unpredictable Fleamen, the grueling Axe Knights, or the infamous Medusa heads, almost every adversary that appears throughout Dracula's castle has the potential to give you a really hard time. And that typically comes from the third culprit, the knockback. Every time you take damage, Simon Belmont will lurch backwards, and if you're right next to a bottomless pit, then into the pit you go, and back to the last checkpoint with you. Lose all your lives, and you gotta start the entire level all over again. Castlevania, like many other franchises that can trace their roots to the NES, is a series built on its difficulty, and that all comes back to this one game. It was so close to claiming the top spot, but there is one game I've beaten that is even harder, and you probably know what it is. And when the falcon removed his helmet, he wept, for there were no more races to run. You seriously weren't expecting anything to beat FZero GX, were you? I mean, come on.
The mighty Falcon can't back down from a challenge now, can he?
No, I cannot, because that cutscene inspired a decade's worth of usernames, including the one for this channel. FZero games were always known for their sense of speed, so it was only fitting for Sega to make the GameCube iteration into a game so fast it makes Mario Strikers Charge look like an arthritic snail in a nursing home full of molasses. The speed of this game typically hovers around just over 1,000 kilometers or 620 miles per hour, and managing to control a machine at that speed takes nerves of steel. If your thumb so much as twitches when it shouldn't, you're gonna fly off the track and instantly lose the race. This would be challenging enough on its own, but races in this game feature 30 contestants compared to the standard 8 to 12 found in most racing games, meaning there are 29 pilots looking to take you out the first chance they get. But as challenging as the normal races are, they don't even hold a candle to the game's story mode. While it isn't very long, being only 9 chapters, everything from chapter 2 onward is nothing short of brutal. It all culminates with a race against a single staff ghost on the hardest version of Rainbow Road ever designed by mortal men. While that might seem a little underwhelming, I actually think it's brilliant. In every other mission, you had obstacles and opponents to deal with. Here, the only variable in place is your own skill level. There's no room for excuses. You can either beat it or you can't. And for those of you who haven't managed yet but are still trying, I offer my support and this advice. Zoom the camera out to the wide view. I never did this for the rest of the game, but it helped immensely against the creators. It also makes the game feel like the original FZero. How fitting. I'll conclude this video by saying this. I've seen a lot of things in my life that I never thought I was going to be able to see. I've seen a Cubs World Series. I've seen like 4 Red Sox World Series. I've seen a Leonardo DiCaprio Oscar. I've seen 2 different versions of the Triple Crown. I've seen a 16 seed upset a 1 seed in March Madness. And that's just sports and 1 movie joke in there. Let's look at video games. I've seen Kid Icarus get a new game after 25 years. I've seen Duke Nukem Forever come out after God knows how long it was in development. I've seen a new Half-Life. Yeah, a new Half-Life. It might have just been VR, but I don't care. That's still Half-Life. We live in a world where not only is all of this possible, but it's actually happened. So I gotta keep hoping, against hope, that someday, one day, Nintendo is gonna finally make a new F-Zero game. Captain Falcon has been one of the faces of Super Smash Bros., which is really the most popular series you have, and an icon of gaming memes for decades. He deserves it. Frankly, I deserve it. Make it happen, Nintendo. That is all.